Recording. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining again. I hope you find this session informative and interesting. This is the Adobe Experience Manager Champion Office Hours chapter. Today we're going to be talking about the AEM Jamstack, Universal Editor, and Content Delivery Network options that you have. We call this in our description a performant, flexible way of using AEM, and it really is a great way to see the power of AEM while using front-end technologies and capabilities. And without further ado, I'm just going to introduce our speaker today is Daniel Strmecki. He's a PhD, also founder of Meticulous Digital. He's an AEM engineer, solutions architect, longtime AEM engineer. Other champions who are joining us today are Angele Taylor, Director of Marketing for PowerPoint, Rami El Camal, one of the original AEM champion class, Senior Solutions Architect for Rennie Consulting. He's the founder and owner of Rennie Consulting. Martin Noble, Chief Technology Officer of XIO and IBM Company. And myself, I'm a product owner of web content at T. Rowe Price. A few words about this office hours chapter. The office hours used to be monthly. It's gotten to be very busy the last couple of months with everything happening in the AEM world. So like I said, we haven't done anything since June, but we're intending to pick everything up again. So it's regular cadence Ask Me Anything webinars. It's hosted by the AEM Champion chapter, office hour chapter, and the AEM champions. The topics change each time. So if you wanted to see something, a topic that you want us to cover, feel free to enter in the chat and we will record it and we'll try to cover it for you. Also, make sure you're muting your microphone so we don't have any background. Thank you. The topics of the office hours are changing every time. So they could be relevant to all AEM users, but it might be more tech oriented, like back-end oriented, or it could be more web content oriented. So the topics change, but there's always something for everyone that we can cover. So feel free to let us know again in the chat if you want us to cover anything. And as an AEM practitioner or developer or partner, you can always pre-submit questions like we did with this session. And I think we only got one question for this session. So feel free again to participate in the chat or unmute yourself and ask questions. We'll let Daniel do his presentation and then we'll cover questions at the end of his presentation. And also, just to mention before we start with Daniel's presentation, if you wanted to join the AEM Office Hours user group, feel free to use the QR code here to the left to go to our website. And also, if you wanted to review this session on demand, feel free to use our YouTube channel playlist QR code that's over here to the right. Scan that and you'll go to our YouTube playlist so you can watch this in your free time whenever you want. Not only this session, but going back to 2 years ago when we started doing those. All right. I think I'm going to stop sharing, Daniel, and we can go to your screen and you can pick it up from here whenever you're ready.
Sure. Thanks for the intro, Greg. And yeah, welcome everyone. So I'll start screen sharing now. Maybe Greg, you can just give me a heads up if you can see my screen. All right.
You can see it.
All right. So I won't go in full presentation mode just because then it goes on multiple screens and I have a few things to show you in the PowerPoint, in the browser, etc. So yeah, let me start by explaining what this demo is about. So basically something new happened in the world of AEM recently, which is the introduction of Universal Editor that kind of opens up different opportunities for clients to implement their front end in different ways. One of those ways is still Adobe Edge Delivery Services, but now with Universal Editor, there are more options. Basically, you can today with Universal Editor integrate any type of front-end solution you want. So therefore, EDS might be a good fit for some, but some clients might look for something different due to several reasons. Maybe they have developers who know React or simply prefer to have a framework like Next.js. So what I did here and what I'm going to present you today is a little demo that I've developed recently. And it is based on Next.js and Universal Editor, and of course AEM as a cloud service, and how to connect like all of them together to achieve a couple of things. So there are basically 4 goals for this demo that I would like to present to you before we jump in the live demo. And basically the goals of the 4 goals are basically like targeting 4 different stakeholders. And let's start with the first one, and that's of course the end users. So what really was in the focus for this demo is to achieve state-of-the-art performance on your website, because performance is also important for SEO, it's important for UX, among other things, of course. And since Edge Delivery is providing extremely good performance and 100 Lighthouse scores, I really wanted to check if that can be achieved also with other technologies. The second thing is the editing experience. And the editor experience, the what you see is what you get editing, is, in my opinion, one of the strongest benefits that AEM brings on the table compared to its competitors. It's always been great editor experience in AEM. And we've seen recently also that other CMSs that used to be purely headless are now going more into this hybrid direction and also providing what you see is what you get editing experience, which has now been, I would say, also improved to the next level with the Universal Editor. So we'll see how that looks. The third point that I wanted to address is also the developer perspective. And that's simply based on the feedback that I got talking to a lot of front-end developers when we discussed mostly Edge Delivery Services and plain JavaScript. I heard a lot of complaints like that it is not something they enjoy doing, or it feels to them like a step back. There are definitely benefits from sticking to plain JavaScript. I can't argue with that. We've all seen that frameworks, come and go. But also modern frameworks give us a lot of things out of the box that just makes developer experience much nicer and faster to do things. And the last perspective is like the architect perspective. So how do we create an architecture for a client that is really flexible? Because when we talk about Jamstack, one of the goals of Jamstack is to allow clients to choose different state-of-the-art tools for the different layers. So I'm talking like front-end experience layer, CMS layer, whatever, PIM, commerce you have underneath. So we'll see how we can achieve that and avoid vendor lock-in with just one vendor and really choose like state-of-the-art tool in the different layers, for example, AEM as your CMS. So how the architecture would look like, and this is very simplified. As you can see, I focused on the experience layer here. So basically we have always a CDN. And what's different in this setup is that you have Next.js as a static site generator here in between, sitting between CDN and your hybrid CMS AEM in this case. And of course, if this was a real enterprise system, there would be many other systems connected to it. So for simplicity, I just drew one, which could also feed data to the static site generator and invalidate its cache, or you can place a gateway in between. You can do a lot of cool things here. But what is important is that in this architecture, 2 things I would like to mention. So you see that I kind of crossed over this line. because when you have a static site generator like Next.js, the idea would be that you pre-generate as much of the content you can, and that you only do fetches in this direction from CDN to static site generator when you need dynamic data. So everything that can be pre-rendered should be pre-rendered, because that's going to bring you the best performances. And of course, you will always have dynamic components. You will have search, you will have user data displayed, etc. Those need to be client-side components. You can still make those dynamic calls. It's just something you avoid if possible. And the second thing I want to mention is, that you can choose different technology in your different layers. So as, for example, looking at this as an alternative to EDS, where you would use CMS from Adobe, you would use the experience layer from Adobe. Roy, could you please mute? Getting some echoes, thank you. Here, sorry, and in the EDS approach, you would also use the CDN, the Fastly from Adobe, which in this case is not possible, of course, because we have Next.js in between, and we can't really simply hook that in together. So what we do here is, for the CMS, we pick AEM, as cloud service, for our static site generators of Next.js, and for CDN, whatever you want. So in this demo, I used Vercel, but you could go with Netlify, or like one of the classic CDNs like Akamai, Cloudflare. So it doesn't make a big difference, because the idea here is that we pre-build HTML, JavaScript, and we push it to the CDN. And I think that's enough of the intro, and I'll jump into the live demo now. Basically, I'm gonna show you the demo from 4 different perspectives. So the first one is going to be this end user perspective. So let's see how this demo site looks from an end user perspective, static site generated, focusing on, again, performance, UX, and SEO. So I'll jump to my browser now. And this is my app that's running on Vercel. So you can see this is live. So I could share the link to this site. You can visit it. And it's a very simple site, of course, since it's just a demo, as all the components here are actually server-side React components, which means they are all delivered from Next.js server-side, pre-built, and there is no dynamic complex components like, for example, search that usually you would see here. But that's not really important for the demo. I'll explain why in a second. So what we do have on the site is, a couple of standard CMS components. We have a hero, we have, of course, our menu and a header, and then we have some teasers here, and we have a few cards and a footer. You could, of course, add dynamic components to on top of this static site generated content. For example, if you want to add search here, you can add a client side component in Next.js, which would render client side, and it wouldn't make a significant impact on your page performance. I think that's the most important thing to mention here. Because what Google and Lighthouse mostly cares is how fast is your site when you switch between the sites, how fast are the components that are first visible to the end user rendering. And if you can see, I'm just switching between a couple of sites, and you see it's, I hope with screen sharing, it's good UX as it is for me in my browser. So really fast load time, really fast re-rendering, because everything is pre-built. The things that you add dynamically on top, they will get rendered after the initial page. So after the LCP, after this big hero image, and Google is not going to penalize you negatively for the things that you add later on top, after the user see what the user expects to see when loading the page. So since Edge delivery is getting really amazing Google Lighthouse results, so no one can complain about that, let's see how this page is performing also on Lighthouse. And you can see it's very much comparable to what you can get with Edge delivery services. So all the metrics from the core web vitals pass, and you can get close to 100. So you don't see I'm faking anything here. Let's run this analysis again. You can see this is the same URL that I show you here. So this is the live site push to Vercel. So if you give it, if we give it a few more seconds, then we should see the live results. And it is performance on mobile is always ranging between 97 and 100. It's not always 100, but who cares anyway? It's really, really good. All right, so yeah, that's everything from the end user perspective. And the next thing I would like to show you is the content editor perspective, because at least every content editor that I've talked to, especially the ones that are used to working with AEM, they are not really keen on switching to full headless. The great thing is that today we can do headless / hybrid. So it's actually a hybrid CMS, but it's almost headless because the things that you need to add to your site to make it editable is really minimum. And I will show you that later also, how that looks like in the universal editor. But the goal here is to achieve what you see is what you get editing experience and instant in context preview without page refreshing and weird behavior, etc. So let me show you how that looks like. So this page picks up all of its data from AEM. Actually my local AEM. So what I have here is my AEM author running, so I can also refresh. So you see it's running on my machine, and you can see I created these 3 pages that you saw from the end user perspective. So I have the home page, the about us, services. I have header and footer extracted because they are the same. Yes, I could have put them in content fragments, but it doesn't really make any difference. So what you can do here now is you can click on a page, and then if you would click edit button, the default one, it will take you to the default editor. Since I didn't find a better solution for it, I added a custom button that takes you to the universal editor. So if you click this one, it opens the site in the universal editor. And this is how it looks. Basically, your site loads on the left side, and what's new in universal editor is that we don't have dialogues anymore. So we have this properties rail. So if you click on the hero component, then you see all of the properties listed of the hero component. So I added, you see title, rich text, image, link, etc. And if you click on any other component, then of course it shows you the properties of that component. So basically everything you see on this page can be edited. And of course it can be edited, for example, rich text. Yeah, we can add some text here, but we could also do inline editing here. And you see, as soon as I click away from any of the input fields, like the preview is really working nicely and instantly. And of course, to achieve this, you need to do a little bit of logic in Next.js. So Next.js needs to know if you are connecting from the editor perspective, because then it needs to show you the data from AEM author because you want the live preview. But if I am looking at the same site, which now I changed here, if I'm looking at from the, sorry, I just need to disable draft mode here, and then you'll see how it looks from the end user perspective. So the end user is not seeing those changes. But if we again take a look from the editor side, they see the changes because this, when the app loads in the universal editor, then it picks up the data from AEM author. When it loads from the end user perspective, then it picks up the data from AEM publisher. With a few other tweaks to make it refresh immediately. Let me show you one more thing. So besides changing the data, let me show you how you can add components to the universal editor. So you see, if I click here, then I see the properties of the component that I currently clicked on. But if I see here, then I see the content tree of the component. So you can also click around here. It will take you to the different component. And I have one of my components is a container. So within that container, I added these teasers and cards. So this is the place where I want my editors to be able to add new components. So how this works in Universal Editor is you have this plus button here. So you don't double click on the page as it used to be in the old editor. but you click here and you can add a new teaser, for example. So now we should get that teaser loaded. Or maybe I kept this page open for too long. Maybe I need to just refresh it. Oh, there it is. Okay, so here is our teaser. Let me just copy one of the images from the previous teaser so this doesn't take too long. So if I just add some data here, so new teaser, something in the description, and we add a CTA. You see, as I'm typing, I'm seeing the live preview right away on the left side, and there we go. We just added a new component on our page. Same as before in the old editor, of course, we need to publish things that we want to get see live. So since I did a few changes on the homepage, that's the only thing that changed. The data is stored in AEM. I will show you how that works later when we come to the developer perspective. But if I now publish this, and then if I go back to my end user perspective, now the new data is also available for my end users, and we see that the new teaser that I added is also visible now on the published website. All right, so I think that's it from the end user perspective, and maybe the most interesting one for some in this call is the developer perspective. So what really was in focus for me for this demo was to get a state-of-the-art front-end framework like Next.js to work with AEM, to simply provide an alternative to some customers, to some developers who prefer that way of working. So now we'll jump over to Visual Studio Code, and I will quickly guide you through how all this is working. But yeah, I won't go into too many details. If you have any questions, please write them down, and we can discuss more in the end of the call. So let's start with components. So I have a couple of components here, not too many. As you see, I have cards, teaser, hero, and let me show you a few things that you need to do to make your React or Next.js components work with the universal editor. So the first thing is every component just needs a few HTML data attributes so that the universal editor knows what to do with them. And I think really Adobe did a great job here, because if you remember before, some of you who might have worked with the SPA editor, you needed to add a lot of external libraries, Adobe libraries, dependencies in your code. And this is now really minimal. And I think really Adobe did it in a good way. Let me explain those properties. So to make hero editable in the universal editor, I need to provide it with a path to the resource in AEM so that it knows when I make changes, where should that content be stored. And of course, you get this path by calling the AEM API and getting the data that you need to render the page. As part of the data set, you also send like the path to the page, and then you just expose it back in the HTML. The type of this is component, so it can be just either component or container. So it's pretty simple. The label is the label that you see when you click on the component in the editor. And the model defines what properties you can have in the hero, so the ones that are shown in the properties later. I'll show you the model definition next. And that's basically it. So there is nothing else in this component to make it like a non-standard React component. Everything else is pure React. Next.js, you see, I don't have any Adobe libraries added in my component. I don't have any additional wrapping elements around my component to make it editable. It's really nice, clean, and simple. The only additional things we do have is a few properties where we say when we have subcomponents, then we also need to tell universal editor, for example, this image component, that it should be a type media and what should be its label, because also when you click on any of the fields within a component, then you also have these labels, and the editor needs to know how to render the input fields for it. So you need to do this in every component, and then let me show you what you need to do to make it also work in the editor. So I've extracted everything you need into a one file, this editor TypeScript file. And basically, all the configurations for the universal editor are based on JSON. And how this JSON ends up in the DOM is basically through the script tag, but with a specific type. So we have 3 scripts that we need to add. The good thing is, if you can see, based on this condition, we only add it if we are in edit mode. So the end user perspective, we won't be adding the scripts to the site when the site is not editable. And there are 3 of them. So there is component JSON, model JSON, and filter JSON. So let's quickly just have a look at them. So the component JSON is the definition of your components. It's basically tells universal editor how to map your React Next components to the AEM components. And if we take a look at a hero that we looked before, so very, very simple. We say we're going to use AEM to store the content, and the resource type is this one. And that's it. Model JSON, on the other hand, defines the fields that we have for the different components. So if we again take a look at a hero, hero has a lot of properties. So we have a title here, text, image, CTA link, CTA text, and you define the types. It's all documented really well. So I'm sure you can find your way around this one. And the last one is the filter JSON, which is basically just used to define which components are allowed to be added by editors in different containers. So the things that we used to have in policies in AEM now, this is all done in the front-end code base, and I think that's also like the biggest change here, because there is more work now moving on the front-end developer side compared to back-end development, how it used to be in the old editor. So you see that all the input fields or the dialog definitions, they are now done in the front-end code base, not done in the backend anymore. Also, if you want to do customizations, custom plugins for the universal editor, then those plugins will also be separate React applications that you need to deploy to the app builder. Yeah, but that's out of scope for this demo. And maybe one more thing I can show you, that all of the pages and everything that you just saw in this demo is just rendered by this one script. Sorry, not this one, but the one with the slug. Oh yeah, it is this one. So what we do here is basically we have this method that is really important for Next.js, generate static params, where we fetch all the pages from AEM. So we call an AEM API, we fetch all the pages, and in this way we tell Next.js, hey, I want you to pre-build me all of these pages and make them available. And then, of course, when we render the page, we make another call to fetch the page-specific data. And there is just a little bit of logic here. If you get a component, you know, that starts with teaser, then you should like load this components and this parameters, etc. But really, it's pretty simple. So in the end, yeah, the rendered HTML in React would look something like this. So some of the components are static here, like header and footer in my example, and you see some are dynamic. So we have the hero part and the content part, which is in a separate container, as you can see here, because we want to have hero on every page, and this content part is fully flexible and left to the authors to define. And I think I'll stop here from the developer perspective, and just yeah, finalize the demo part by coming back to the architecture slide. So since I know it's important for some customers, especially like big enterprises, to really have a lot of flexibility in their architecture. And this was also my main driver for this demo is to have multiple options. So you can choose if you want to go all in with Adobe, I mean also the CDN edge delivery part of it, or you can choose to go with Adobe for AEM, which is definitely like the top enterprise CMS, but you get to choose the rest of the stack however you want to. So in this demo, I've used Next.js. You could also do a similar thing with Vue, Angular, or something else. Again, you could choose any CDN you want, and the more important thing, you can replace it whenever you want. So if you are switching, for example, from one CDN to another, it's not going to be nearly as painful as if you went with a different, less flexible architecture. So what I hope you learned from this demo is that there are different ways how we can build things these days with AEM. So we can make it very flexible, and we can achieve top performance and great editor experience, also using alternative solutions like this one. So yeah, with that, I'll end the live demo part. And Greg, do we jump to the questions right away?
We will go to some questions. Thank you. Take a breather, get some water, hydrate. This was great. To me, the performant part, how fast changes are happening, is amazing. On the content authoring, like when you were adding the component, for example, it's refreshing to see that. Overall, very smooth process. TypeScript's, like it looks very clean to me. A great approaches. We did post a couple of. I posted the link to your blog in the chat so folks can read more about your approach here, and another relevant article on WYSIWYG versus document-based editing. So yeah, if you're ready, we can go to questions. The one pre-submitted question that we got was what how can we explain the universal editor benefits in terms of headless content? So I'm guessing, if you're interested in doing pure headless, where does universal editor fit in? What?
Yeah, good question. So if you want to do pure headless, by definition, then you don't have an editor. Then, I mean, your editor is your content fragment editor. And what I saw is that, there are great demos by Adobe for that approach. So if you search for examples using the fully headless approach, there are plenty of them. But if you are looking for something like this, like a hybrid solution, then there is not that much available. So that's why I decided to build this demo. I also saw that there is a demo similar to this one, where instead of using sites, Adobe used content fragments. So I don't think that's fully headless by definition. So I think that's, again, more like a hybrid solution. But as I said, the universal editor leaves such a small footprint on your front-end application that it's really negligible. So I think the benefits that you give to your content editors by far, are more important than the small data attributes and a few scripts that you need to add into your application, which again, by definition, wouldn't be full headless, but it would be almost headless, I would say.
Right. Yep, that makes sense. And I did post another link in there on the different edge delivery authoring methods for folks who wanted to read more about that on the Adobe Experience League documentation. And I think Rami took a couple of those questions they answered, but I'm just gonna ask for everyone else's awareness here. The question that Wilson, for another AEM champion, asked is, how do we use dynamic data or tokens on the pages using Universal Editor? And Rami already mentioned that it depends on the implementation, of course. And if we're talking about APIs as being the source of the data, then you would need
Yeah, I just had a quick follow-up to that as well. I don't know if Wilson's still with us, but um, I think that at least the way I understood the question is we have dynamic data that's coming out from outside of AEM. I don't know, think stock data that needs to be updated continuously, etc. And the challenge is, well, this is tokenized or authenticated data. At least that's how I understood the question. So I was just waiting to see if that is the case. Because
yeah.
a lot of the time when you
Hmm.
have a dedicated server side, you can have private public keys, etc. Not everything is essentially on the front end JavaScript.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but this is not a standard front-end JavaScript that runs in the client. Next.js is a server. So you have a server on your front end. So AEM is your backend server, Next.js is your front end server. And Next.js can do certain things on the server, or it can do certain things in the browser. You have the option to choose whether you do one or the other. So everything pretty much you can do with AEM, you can also do with JavaScript in Next.js, including server-side operations, including fetching tokens, storing secrets, whatever.
And to follow up to that question, the content repository properties, the Java content repository, are they being updated, or how are they updated? If they are using
Yeah.
Universal.
Yeah, so you saw when I was making edits, right? So as soon as I made an edit before that, maybe like a few milliseconds or half a second before you see the changes, first those changes need to end up in AEM, and then Next.js picks it up. So basically, what happens as soon as you click on an input field, you enter something, and then you click somewhere else. So Universal Editor is gonna send a post request to AEM author. It's gonna store the data in the JCR. So you can go to your CRXD and you can see all the changes on the data there. And this is, again, why we need to instruct Universal Editor with the path and the resource type of each component. So it knows how to store things in the JCR.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that was happening on the sidebar, right? On the Universal Editor while you were showing in your demo. Okay, that makes
The
sense.
easiest way to think of this one is it's no different than how dialogues are on, let's call them the classic AEM way of authoring, right? So as soon as you hit the OK, you're doing post calls back into AEM, which stores it into the JCR based on the Sling resource type. So that hasn't changed.
Got it. All right. Someone asked, David Cruz asked, does Universal Editor support app design?
App
Um,
design. Well,
yeah,
I'm not sure what
yeah. If
what
David, if you're
what is
still,
meant by that.
Sorry, I
uh,
meant mobile app design like React Native and stuff like that. I was trying to stretch it beyond just desktop and then mobile view web browsers. I was just wondering if you guys had any info on that, because then that's kind of leveraging the headful or the headlessness, right?
hmm,
Essentially, though, David,
Uh,
if I understand, you're saying you want to use the same data in AEM in the JCR in order to serve a mobile application. Is that correct?
Yeah. And my motivation for even asking is that I thought headful was kind of nice, and headless is kind of solving for something that kind of already existed, but then we have all this data nested up in all these content fragments, and it's all separate from the front end. And I'm not so focused on app design as I am just exploring other opportunities outside of just web pages.
So if you're using content fragments, and this takes me back to experience fragment days when it was heavily, I mean, it's still heavily being used. Um, the rule of thumb is if you have a single source of data, that's being used among multiple platforms, the one thing that you have to guarantee is the structure of the data, right? And that's where content fragments come into play. I know this is a little different. So what Daniel was showing, because you're still going to the JCR, it's still attached to a page. It's still to an extent unstructured. It's structured within the Sling resource type of a component, but overall the page is not structured because you can add whichever component you want in any location on the page. The way I've done it in the past is the answer is yes, you can share the same data. That's why you have GraphQL on top of AEM content fragments, where you can use that in order to essentially query the data and use it on a mobile application. But I would not, it's not necessarily the solution that we're seeing right now, because again, the solution that we're seeing right now is using Universal Editor in order to store data for the page, which is naturally unstructured to start with. I've done it in the past too, where we had clients that wanted to share the data from the pages on a mobile application. The only way we could do that successfully is to lock that template. So going back to the idea of a template in AEM, where we can go, when you generate a home page, it's always going to have a teaser, an image, and a piece of text, because that guarantees the structure of the page. So when I create a custom API, I can pull the data in a JSON format and then use it on a home page within the mobile application. I hope that sort of answers your question.
It gave me a lot of information that filled in some blanks, so I appreciate that. Your highlight of unstructured data, even though we have the content fragments, it's not truly structured till it kind of hits more of that GraphQL stage of the life cycle of the data. I think that's kind of what you were saying. And then, yeah, you gave me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And if you were going in direction, if you could have like maybe like a preview of your like native app and like do this kinds of edits, then the answer would be no, this is not supported. I don't think it would ever be, because there are so many of these, you know, different framework solutions you can use, and you know, AEM and Universal Editor is fully oriented on the web and like the HTML classic approach, or whatever framework you choose, but it's still a website.
Yeah, thanks. I that's kind of the vibe I got from working with it. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for jumping in, David, in the conversation. Thank you. Yeah, great alternatives there. And with regards to, we have one more question from Janit Vora. How is cache invalidation taking place in the CDN when we do page edits and updates, and which causes SSG to rebuild?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will tell you how it works in the demo, because it's a very simple solution, and I will tell you how I would implement it if this was a real project that was going live. So basically, Next.js allows two types of invalidation requests. So now you asked about invalidation on the CDN, but we have actually, with this solution, we have two invalidations we need to take care of. One is Next.js, because Next.js also has its own internal cache, for example, also for the data, like all the API calls and everything. And then you have also your CDN cache. And it works very similarly. So like every CDN, Next.js also for its internal cache supports two types of invalidation. One is TTL based. So you just set like a time when Next.js is gonna check if the new content is there. And that's the simple approach. That's what I've used in this demo. So basically after every minute, like it's gonna check if there's new data. But of course, that wouldn't work really well for an enterprise production site, right? So a better approach would be to use invalidation requests. And this is also supported in Next.js. So what we can do is we can catch publication events on AEM. And once a page is published on AEM, we can send an invalidation request to Next.js. So Next.js would know this specific site has been changed and I need to rebuild it. And ideally, also, Next would send the updated HTML to the CDN after rebuilding the page. This would be ideal scenario, because there would be like updates of the cache only when the data changes. It's a little bit more work to implement, but I think there is a lot of benefits in that approach, and that is like the usual Jamstack recommended way of working.
Great. Yeah, I don't think. Oh yeah, we got one more question. From Esteban, another AM champion. Sort of a basic question. He says, back in the SBA days, the front end app controlled the content in a way that even though you could create a new page, you still had to inform the head page about the page's existence, where it is, and the content it has. Is Universal Editor following the same pattern? And meaning, do you define which areas of content are enabled for editing?
Not sure if I understood correctly, but do you define which areas of content are enabled for editing? Yes, absolutely. So you still need to define that. So you can still make it super flexible and allow editors to do whatever they want. You can purposely limit it, like I did in the demo, because usually what I've seen on AM projects is you want to have some content area where you allow freedom, right? But you don't want them to get you don't want editors to get really, I don't know, changing headers, footers, and this type of stuff that we used to define in the template before. So yeah, I would say you can still do whatever you want. It's going to be a little more work if you make it fully flexible, and it's usually not what most clients want, in my experience. If the head needs to know when the new content is there, if we are only doing content, so if in my demo I would now go in AEM and create a new page and just create the page using the components that already have the front-end implementation, then it would work out of the box. I wouldn't have to change anything. So the front end would just pick up the new page from the API and it would render it. I don't have to make any changes. If I want to add a new component, then of course I need to add that the code for that component also in the front-end application, so in the head. And we have this mapping. So we have that file that I showed you, which maps Next.js components or React server-side components to AM components. So you always need that piece, and the full rendering is done on Next.js. So the AM code is super simple for this demo. I mean, the AM is basically like, in this demo, it's a database of content. It's an API layer that delivers the content. But what I like about it is that you can reuse like still the great stuff about AEM, which is mostly, I would say, multi-site manager. And multi-site manager has now limited support for Universal Editor, but I heard more support is coming out in Q1 next year. And for example, integrations with translation providers. So you still have all the content in AEM. So you can still use whatever translation provider, translate your content, roll it out in different countries. So you can still use all those great features of AEM.
Got it. Yeah, I don't think we have any other questions in the chat. Feel free to jump in, unmute yourselves if you have questions that you want us to answer. By us, I mean probably Daniel and Rami. But yeah, I don't see anything else coming in here. A question, I guess, general question for mostly for partners in the call and for developers. Have you worked with Adobe and clients? Have you worked in many use cases with Universal Editor the way that Daniel was presenting here, like the approach that he was presenting, or what is the trend that you're seeing in your organizations? And I guess, I'll go back to asking like folks like Rami, is this approach taking off, or are you seeing most folks are still finding ways to use Universal Editor versus like wondering if they should go document-based editing? What do you see out there?
An interesting question. If you're looking at the magnitude of like how many clients are already on Universal Editor, I would say it's up and coming. I wouldn't say it has made a dent in the overall percentage of users yet. A lot of people are, I think we're still at the sort of the tail end of moving a lot of clients from AMS or on-prem into the cloud, just to introduce them to the whole cloud idea. Because
Right.
keep in mind, fundamentally, as soon as you start using something like edge delivery or any of the stuff that you're seeing right now, there is a major change in the way you think. It's no longer a server that you have under your desk in your head office, right? Everything is cloud, and I think that itself is a challenge for a lot of clients. Specifically for think health or insurance or banking, where a lot of it has to be a little tightly coupled with their framework. But I've definitely seen content being delivered from documents, whether it's Google Docs, etc. I think that's a little ahead of Universal Editor.
Oh, interesting.
I see the potential, but I haven't seen a lot of traffic on it yet. I don't know, Daniel, if you've seen different.
No, no, I definitely agree. But yeah, I'm always trying to look more in the future than what's like the current state. I think that Universal Editor it's just been released, right? And like everything, it doesn't have full support for all the features. But it's definitely something that's going to be used more and more in the future. And it will most probably be the editor for AEM. So SPA editor, classic editor, they're going to disappear after a few years. They are still going to be with us, right? We will have a lot of projects, like the migrations are going to take forever. But in some years, I'm sure Universal Editor is going to be like the only editor, like long-term supported. So I think it's going to be used very much in the future. And regarding document-based editing versus Universal Editor, I mean, that's a whole different topic. So I'm sure both will have their use cases and clients that want to use one or the other approach. I personally prefer definitely what you see is what you get editing experience always over doc-based editing, but I see that doc-based editing would be really interesting for small, mid-sized companies or projects that need to go live really, really fast. And I see Universal Editor, especially like approaches like this with Next or something like that, more use case for enterprises that have their design systems, that have maybe already React component libraries. So this is definitely like, I think, the difference in my. So I think both will find the market, just a different one.
Yeah, 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 and that's why I was asking, because that we're seeing a lot of that, um, questioning of which way to go. But yeah, like you said, Universal Editor is fairly new, so I do think there's a lot more there, especially for larger enterprises that they can use to expand their content delivery and orchestrate their content in ways that makes sense for larger enterprises. And I can see like maybe document-based authoring being um, fairly useful for smaller organizations who maybe don't have the skill set, or their content authors are more used to doing document-based authoring. An interesting question we had in the Slack channel, for everyone's awareness, was like with AEM forms versus like using document-based authoring form like Microsoft Forms, and things like that are still how information is being used in the document-based editing are still pretty new to everyone. So that's another area that is going to see developments, I think, in the near future. Yeah, so just like David Cruz also mentioned in the chat, from an exclusively headful approach, I guess the common thread is to do headless, doing the content in content fragments first, and then within the existing components, making sure that that content can be used in headless approach. So that I think most of us are in that boat. With regards to the question, I guess, of what we were talking about here today, where to find the recording, I'm going to share again my screen to show you the QR codes, and feel free to scan these codes here. You can join our Champion Office Hours website and chapter by scanning the code here to the left, and then you can review today's session in the YouTube channel here. You can view all of our past sessions essentially in the YouTube playlist by scanning the code to the right there. I just wanted to mention that.
Hey,
Yep.
sorry. Hey, Daniel, this is Karthik here. I joined late. Apologies for that. But I was intending to get some clarity on one of the questions. I know Universal Editor has by default support from Adobe Fastly as a CDN. Is there any, maybe it's already discussed, but just wanted to know, is there any flexibility for a non-Fastly CDN can also be used for this Universal Editor? And the second question I have is, in doc-based authoring, you can change the fonts and all that, right? But is there any flexibility beyond that to have custom fonts and all also being added? So these are the two questions I was hoping to get some clarity on. Apologies if that has already been discussed here since I joined a bit late here. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for the questions. And you might want to watch the demo again, because this was like a demo with a custom CDN, or actually Vercel, which is a little bit more than a CDN, but you could hook in any CDN you want. So I just want to point out here that from my point of view, I'm really happy that Adobe released both EDS and Universal Editor, because it gives a lot of flexibility to us partners that are doing implementations for clients. And EDS is not going to be, it's going to be a great fit for some, it's not going to be a great fit for others. So now we have a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility. If you check what also other like competitive CMS vendors are doing, it's going in the same direction. And I think with Universal Editor in this headless/hybrid space, AEM is now definitely again one of the leaders. So you can hook it to any front end and any CDN you want. So you can go full custom. You don't have to use Fastly CDN at all. Yeah, it's still gonna sit there, in front of your AEM, but you can have it bring your own CDN in this setup as well. And the second question was around fonts, if I remember correctly. So
yes,
since,
yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. So again, this demo is not about EDS. It's about Next.js, and we do everything custom in Next.js. So this demo was built from scratch, and you can do whatever you want. So basically, everything that you see on the page can be fully customized in Next.js. And by the way, I never wrote like React or Next.js code before in my life, and I was able to build this demo in a couple of days. Wow. So documentation is great. Yeah, and if you have some friends that know CSS a little bit better than you, then yeah, it can be done in just a couple of days.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very encouraging. Yeah, Karthik, we can do a future session on EDS, edge delivery services, and that kind of approach as well. But as far as I'm concerned, there's always something. It seems like after every summit, we have an incremental change and some new development in both document-based and Universal Editor WYSIWYG capabilities, or something that's added there, new library, that's always worth reviewing. So we could definitely write it down and do a session on EDS based edge delivered services based approach.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think we have anything else. And I want to give you back some more time. I know these are busy days for a lot of us. Rami, did you have anything else to add? Anyone from the champions?
I am good. Thank you so much for doing this, Greg and
Yeah.
Daniel, and thanks for everybody who has helped out.
Yeah, thank you again, Daniel. Thank you all for joining. Again, feel free to go to our YouTube playlist so you can watch this session. We'll post it in next couple of days, and previous sessions about different topics. Thank you all for joining. Whomever is celebrating, happy holidays, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks for joining. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.